Hello and welcome to Shiaght Laa. I'm Fiona McArdle. Sé Fiona McArdle mish, as bavariam am goltach ashu gus Shiaght Laa. Sa Claire and Hirt show. In Shiaght Laa this time, na manani har moor, the Manxies abroad. This is a time of year when delegates from the island take part in large gatherings overseas. As Jeachan and Niachan Neal Hanson, a look at some unusual parts of the island's story, we hear from Neal Hanson and Matthew Richardson about how that's come about. But first, let's have a look at some musical events to enjoy. This evening, Thursday the 10th of August at 7:45, John and Karen Elliott and friends will be entertaining in St Catherine's Church in Port Erin. Admission is free and there will be a retiring collection for the church and refreshments will be available in the hall afterwards. If you're in Douglas this evening, Thursday the 10th, you can go along to the Villa Marina Arcade for a free concert at 8 o'clock with the Isle of Man Swing Band. This is part of the Isle of Man Arts Council's summer season. Next Wednesday, the 16th of August, the Villa Marina Arcade will resound to the mighty Wurlitzer in a lunchtime concert at 1 o'clock, when David Redfern will be at the console, and again it's part of the Isle of Man Arts Council's summer season. This will be an opportunity to see and hear the Wurlitzer really being put through its paces. David Redfern first played a theatre organ at 13 years of age, and he's a leading member of the Cinema Organ Society. He regularly plays concerts on the Wurlitzer in Blackpool Tower Ballroom, amongst other instruments, and has played for radio and television and a range of recordings. So that's next Wednesday, the 16th of August at 1 o'clock in the Villa Marina Arcade with David Redfern. And next Wednesday evening, the 16th of August, the summer concert at 7:45 in St Thomas's Church in Douglas presents fun folk music with the Shenanigans Band. Admission is free with a retiring collection and refreshments will be available. On Scree Shakespeare and Doran, The Tempest, tan bedda ta Gimmerka Alonso, Rí Naples, Múr Chúrit, as tadsant bord chit talu, Ellen ta nish an reim Olisach Prospero. Tan Cheveshi Alonso, Trinculo a Stefano, chit de veis scurit, as ta chit quailrish an veist Caliban. Ta Trinculo a Stefano, fud a chelia, Leorish na tad clashed in munan geet, ach ta Caliban cur criach doru. Na gauji al, tan ellen len da chianan, Shianan as faunan millish, ta Jonas, ganadi. Ta shen da chreon spurl, be not afeard, the isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. Ta skielan regedan sa tradisiún maninach, Macewn Karen a Sarenan, Hayaclashen, on Shian Awana, Vosh Arenish Yinli, na Vosh Arenas Bliosen, Niau Hukasach. Ta skielan on, Macewn Slight a Fagan, Geistjach, na Fuddy, ta just Olach Chonalan de Vunja Vega, ta Jinu Sire Shar Bear Fadenach. Redden ta Tachat nach Nodad Soijaga. Keirtanella smoony slide another had sajaka machna ridden vagolair, as she oba a vunja vega ve. Ach, va fis ok achten lie, de hachna azi. As nish, ta fisain oru mar shan kliachtachen, ta jichen huech dan hoodsmoede lei nish. The folklore of the Isle of Man has brought us many unusual stories and explanations for what we see in some parts of the landscape. But even in more conventional history, some things have happened, which developed in surprising ways, things which provide an intriguing narrative and an unexpected outcome. Loaghtan Books have published a collection of these with the title Manx Myths, Mysteries and Miscellanies, and these are pieces from the work of Robert Kelly. However, Robert Kelly himself died 5 years ago. We hear from Robert Kelly's friend and executor, Neal Hanson, and from Matthew Richardson of Manx National Heritage about Robert Kelly himself and how the book came about.
He left school quite young, as soon as he'd done his O-levels, and went straight into journalism as a junior reporter on the Isle of Man Times. And he worked in journalism throughout his life. And at one time he was the editor of the Isle of Man Times, the Isle of Man Examiner, and the Manx Star, all at once. The Times publications, Robert produced a little series which were called Times Monographs, and they didn't really ever get off the ground. He only actually published three. One was How the TT Started, one was The Vikings and Tinwood, and one was the Summerland Story, which was a history of how Summerland came to be built, and was later expanded into a substantially larger book which was on sale at Summerland.
Of course, that's very poignant this year.
Well, yes, it is, and who could have anticipated what was going to happen at the time that the book was written? In addition to this, he found time to write quite a number of books on Manx subjects. A couple of examples are For Those in Peril, which was the history of Sir William Hillary and the foundation of the RNLI, Tales of the Tailless, which was a book all about Manx cats, With a Song in Their Hearts, which was the history of the Douglas Choral Union, and TT Pioneers, which was a history of early car racing on the island.
And as well as editing the papers, he was contributing to them as well.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, he wrote various articles on various subjects. So, yes, a prolific author as well as a busy journalist. He and his late wife Linda were very interested in almost anything Manx, and they had a huge collection of postcards and a huge collection of Manx items, Manx memorabilia, three-legged teapots, all kinds of Manx things. Unfortunately, he passed away at quite a young age, or a young age nowadays anyway, at the end of 2018. And he, at the time of his death, of course, he was very much involved in writing a book or a series of books which had been on the go for a very long time. And that brings us on to the book which has just been published.
What was the genesis then of the book? You say that Robert left papers behind, but obviously there's a lot of work in editing and bringing them together.
Well, yes, he'd started on what was going to be a history of the media on the island. And as that developed, it expanded hugely and changed into a totally different form. And Robert's provisional title for it was The Making of Manxness. And he saw it as being a history of Manxness and how it had developed over the years and what was Manx, what was Manxness. And he went on researching and on writing. But he never drew a line under it and got round to preparing it for publication. So when he died, there was just a series of articles which weren't at that time in a publishable form.
So what has been involved then in getting them ready for publication now?
Well, I was very keen to see at least some of Robert's unpublished work actually being published. I don't have the ability to do that myself, but Matthew Richardson, who of course is a very well-known, respected and prolific author, undertook the job of going through the articles that Robert had left, selecting what he thought was the best of them or the most suitable for publication and putting them in a form which would be suitable for publication.
And it's called Manx Myths, Mysteries and Miscellanies, and it is very much a miscellany. It's one of the great joys of it that you never know what's coming next.
Yes, it's perhaps a rather unusual title, but as they say, I think the book does what it says on the tin. And there was some discussion about a likely title with Matthew Richardson and with Sarah Goodwins of Loaghtan Books, who have published the book. And I suggested that it was a miscellany and perhaps reflected the Manx Miscellanies, which were published in the Manx Society series of volumes in the 1860s. So after a bit more discussion, Sarah came up with the title of Myths, Mysteries and Miscellanies, which is pretty well what you found in the book.
Are there any particular favourites that you have amongst the pieces there?
Well, there are so many that it's difficult to pick out a favourite. They cover such a vast variety of subjects. There are some very interesting Manx subjects covered. I mean, things like the concrete ship or the Vitascope clock, and other more well-known things like Manx Tholtons. And it's quite a miscellany. I'd simply like to say how grateful I am to Matthew Richardson and Sarah Goodwins for making the publication of the book possible.
And George Hobbs has added copious illustrations to it as well.
Oh yes, indeed. He's produced some very appropriate photographs to go with some of the articles. It's a book that Robert would have been very happy with, very proud of.
When Neal first approached me about this, he told me that Robert had been writing a book that he hadn't finished when he died. And he said to me, would I be able to finish the book and tidy it up and get it into a publishable state? So I said, yeah, certainly, I'll be more than willing to have a look at it. So Neal handed over to me a drive where everything had been copied from Robert's computer. So I spent a weekend going through this, looking through all the writings, and I went back to Neal and I said, well, it's not just a case of there being a book there. There's at least 2 books that have been started to a certain extent, possibly even a third, but I don't think any of them are in a position for me to finish them. They were so far off a published state that I'd have to generate a lot more new material, which would have been difficult for me because these were clearly Robert's books written in his own style. So I suggested a different approach, which was to bring together the best bits of what was there from these 3 books, plus there were other finished articles that maybe had been intended for use in magazines and things like that. So I said, well, let's try and bring together the best bits and put them together in a single volume.
One of the books that Neal mentioned Robert had been writing was about the press, and yet, as Neal said, there doesn't seem to be very much in here that reflects that in a way. So what other stuff was there in there then?
There was a huge variety of material. So a lot of it was about Manx identity, what Robert perceived as being Manx identity and how it had evolved. But what really struck me was the breadth of this material. You know, it's things from automotive history. There's a lot of Manx folk culture in there. Robert was obviously very interested in Manx language because he frequently makes reference to if there's a Manx term for a particular type of person or a particular theme, he brings the Manx into it at every opportunity. So that was obviously an interest of his as well. Place name history. There was just so much, and I felt it was so varied. And me, I mean, I've worked with Manx history for over 20 years, and when I started looking through it, I thought, gosh, there's things here I didn't know. Things like the concrete ship up in the north of the island. I'd never heard of that. So I thought, well, if I haven't heard of these things, there's quite a good chance that a lot of other people haven't as well. And I thought that it was an interesting project and a very worthwhile project to try to bring together this research that clearly Robert had spent a lot of time on, and to bring it to a wider audience.
And having gone through all the material, then, are there any particular areas, as you say, it is very miscellaneous and draws on all sorts of areas. Are there any particular areas that you found most interesting, particularly fascinating?
The chapter that interests me most is about the Times ghost. Because that's the one chapter in it that Robert was writing from personal experience, when as a young journalist at the Isle of Man Times, there were all these strange happenings in the 1960s, which were put down to one of the former owners, one of the Brown family, being disgruntled at the change in ownership of the Times, which occurred in the 1960s when the business was purchased. And Robert, being a young journalist, was required to work late in the editing room, late at night when all these strange things happened. So he writes from personal experience. And again, this was new to me. I hadn't heard this story. And I thought that to have this first-hand account of this incident was very interesting. That was another of his interests, by the way. He was interested in the paranormal. So there were odd things as well that didn't make it into the finished book. About he saw a UFO at one time, and that increased his interest in the paranormal. And he had been a contributor to a paranormal magazine in the UK. So there was just so much breadth to it all, really.
You mentioned there were possibly 3 books in there, and Neal mentioned about a history of the Manx press. What do you see as the other two major strands?
There was quite a lot of car history in there. There was a semi-finished history of Manx motor car racing on the island, and there was quite a lot about various aspects of the tourist industry. There were more articles rather than a finished book. As I say, it was a miscellany is a good way of describing what was on the disc, because there were also several versions of the same chapter at different stages of completion, and sometimes it looked like Robert had changed his mind and gone off on a slightly different tack. Maybe he thought of a different outlet for this article, so he's slightly rewritten it in a different way. So it was trying to work out which of the different versions of a chapter would be the best to develop. And of course, when I was working on it, I was very conscious that Robert had a particular turn of phrase, a particular style of writing, and I didn't want to eradicate that. You know, I didn't want to put my stamp on it too much. I wanted to keep his style of writing. So I corrected the English a little bit, mainly punctuation, but I didn't want to overwrite his style. So we've tried very much to keep it in his style of writing. I was tasked with bringing the work to publication. But Neal, I took on the task of finding a publisher, and we wanted a local publisher, obviously, because it's a local book for the local market. And neither of us had worked with Loaghtan Books before, but we were very pleased with how we had gotten famous. We had a great working relationship with Sarah there. A lot of the illustrations came from the Loaghtan Books archive. Robert had quite a number of illustrations in his own archive, but there wasn't enough, so we were conscious of the fact we were short of some pictures. So Loaghtan Books helped us out a lot there by filling in a lot of the illustrations, and really did a first-class job in the presentation of the book. So I can't speak highly enough of them and their work on it.
Neal Hanson and Matthew Richardson telling us about Robert Kelly himself and how some of his work was prepared for publication by Loaghtan Books as Manx Myths, Mysteries and Miscellanies, available now at £14.95. Hielshin and Hiets Jerry Michaun and Acht Henk Jerenji Vanin Kujach, de Chru Shejach Dernjach und Haki Jeg as Daid. Redvad Kummel Tashpenas and Yari, Ek Taine Kallian Dua, as Tashpenas a Tui, Dag Saura, Maren Seregen Lazer, ons Romsei. Harauna Buil Shen, Kui de Nisa Jas, Hugga Bun, and Tashpenas Heen, Haya Kummel Erich. Bush Nike Jeg Nenas Tree Feed, Henken Tashpenas Sauri, Vons Romsei, de Ve Kummich ons Dulish, ons en Derevlein, as ons Romsei en Vleinella. Treva Troggelen no Troggacherivol ons Romsei, Daddy and Tashpenas Tui gus Sulby. Tre Henken Bol ons Dulish de Ve en Inna da Junach Sporten, Hai and Tashpenas Kummel ons Sulby rish feed blain. Der a Daddy gus Nocelo, Red Hede Kummel and Counschachten Shaw. The Manx Agricultural Society became royal comparatively recently, as it was in 1951 that George VI gave permission for it to become the Royal Manx Agricultural Society. Tomorrow, Friday the 11th and Saturday the 12th of August, will be the 2 days of the Royal Manx Agricultural Show at Nocelo. The show is a celebration of Manx life and tradition. Whilst it provides 2 days of entertainment, with a wide selection of food and drink providers and a wide range of craft and trade exhibitors, it's actually the culmination of many months of hard work from show participants preparing their livestock for competitions, with the ultimate prize for the best animal in the show. The Royal Manx Agricultural Show will be open on both Friday the 11th and Saturday the 12th of August from 9:30 in the morning to 5 o'clock. Ag an imbach show ta de elia vura goler, ta nen jau na elia ed a cheltiach, ta goilstiach ginti vosh na smooth a hirken ta slide a cajun kunta de ve keltiach. Ta shen neren, nalben, mannen, Breton, Kernow as Britain beg. As Nis Asturias as Galicia, hamas kelti elia vosh feine krunia. Tan ferella na elia ta ginu erdelia je unchier as echenja. Shen Breton as Bretnish, san Eisteddfod a Junach. Na Shiaght an Eisteddfod Genedlaethol níos dé éireacht Bretnish ons Patagonia as Jane Brittany Fine Crunia. Last Thursday, a charter flight took off from Ronaldsway, carrying a party of Manx performers to the Festival Interceltique de Lorient. So, for 10 days, there will be Manx music and dance, as well as Manx food and drink, available as part of that huge festival, which attracts hundreds of thousands of people to the city of Lorient in Brittany. The work of arranging the Manx delegation to Lorient is undertaken by Grainney Sheard.
It's the biggest inter-Celtic festival in the whole world. So you've got delegations from all the Celtic nations and the Celtic diaspora. So Scotland, Wales, Cornwall Island, Galicia, Asturia, Brittany. We've even got the Scottish diaspora in Australia. We've got Acadie in Canada and even America. So it's wherever the Celts appear across the world. The scale of this is huge. You expect to see around about 850,000 visitors over the 10 days. The first Sunday there's a grand parade, and at that alone the figure is roughly 80,000, which is the population of the Isle of Man. Fundamentally, it's a celebration of Celtic music and dance, but you've also got other artistic mediums that are going on, celebrations of painting, photography, theatre, sculpture, traditional artisanry, sport and gastronomy as well. So it's a celebration of Celtic culture, however that manifests itself across the world. We couldn't do it without the support of groups like Culture Vannin, the Department for Enterprise, the Isle of Man Arts Council, so they really do provide invaluable support to this project. Our musicians, dancers and artists just are so incredibly talented that the Isle of Man holds equal weight in the eyes of the festival. We hold equal weight as Scotland and Ireland, who have bigger budgets to put behind their delegations. And even though we are allocated a smaller delegation, we might not have as much of a budget, we certainly still pull equal weight to these other nations. So it's a great thing to get behind and support with funding, and we really appreciate the organisations that do so.
Grainney Sheard. At the same time, the Eisteddfod Genedlaethol, the national Eisteddfod of Wales, is taking place in the Llyn Peninsula in the northwest of the country. The Eisteddfod invites delegates from Mod na Halaba, Oireachtas na HÉireann, as Cruinniach Vannin to attend, as well as representatives of Gorseth Cernau, as Gorseth Frege, the Gorseth of Cornwall and of Brittany, as well as the Gorseth of Patagonia, the area of Argentina colonised by the Welsh from the 1850s. This year in Cruinniach is represented by Eisteddfod in Cruinniach, that is President of Cruinniach, Annie Kissack. There's a ceremony when all the delegates go up to the stage to be welcomed, and one of them gives a short speech on their behalf. This year, that was given by Annie Kissack.
Ac o Ynys Manaw, Phil Gorn ac Annie Kissack.
Annie o Ynys Manaw.
Machedjan, Tashin Tetnasat, the vein and Marsjow, a Selmage, the Row Eisteddfod Genedlaethol. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Annie Kissack at Eisteddfod Genedlaethol last Monday afternoon. A Sinevo Shiaght Laa and Shiaght Show. That's it from Shiaght Laa this time. Next Thursday, Marilyn Crellin will be here with the last programme in the present series. But now from me, Fiona McArdle, send you.